All right, we are here again with another Weatherford Speaker Series. We are delighted to have with us today one of Fort Worth's finest, attorney, Leon Reed. And we are so delighted to have him today to share with us about organizational leadership, about the future of organizational leadership, about how he got to the place where he is currently, and how you as a student can use some of some of this knowledge as you're preparing for graduation, as you're looking for professional relationships, as you're looking for employment over the next couple of years. So, Attorney Reed, we're very happy to have you today. I want to start off by really having you dive into your background, who you are, where you're from, how long you've been in your career, and what kind of led you to this point where you are today in your life.
Well, thank you for considering me, first of all. I'm from Fort Worth, born in New Orleans, but I tell people all the time I was born into the world in West Fort Worth in Como. Uh, and so this is where I learned all of my practical knowledge over here in West Fort Worth. But immediately after high school, I went to the Marine Corps. And of course, the Marine Corps, you go in as who you are, but you come out a Marine and you come out changed. And the change is permanent. You know, as we say, we're Marines, you know, forever. Once Marine, always Marine, because you can't separate the egg once you've beaten it into the cake, you know. So when the cake is baked, it's baked.
Mm.
And it was my military experience that actually heavily influenced me joining or me becoming an attorney. I ended up being an embassy guard stationed in Nigeria, Togo, and Barbados. But when I was in Nigeria, rather, that's back when we used to have these like 6-foot satellite antennas, you know, but it only got one channel. And so I did a late night shift, and I couldn't sleep, and I cut the TV on in the Marine house where all of the Marines lived, and what was showing that day was an episode of Ricky Lake. Now, you may remember Ricky Lake, your students probably won't.
No.
But you know, she was a Sally Jesse Raphael. Y'all won't know her either. She was an Oprah before there was an Oprah. She had a daytime talk show. You know, and the episode that day, Doc Pullam was about cheating.
Mm.
SAT, ACT, these different kinds of tests. This young man stood up, said, Ricky, my name is Dana. Since my name is Dana, I had my girlfriend take the SAT test for me. You know, she
Mm.
scored 300 more points than I did, got me in the school I'm in. I'm a junior in college and I cheat all the time.
Wow.
Now, me being Sergeant Marines, leader of men and Marines, I'm sitting there listening to this and I'm like, this dude is a junior in college. He could graduate in a year, become an officer, and be in charge of me.
Mm.
And that's something that the rest of that morning and into the day, it didn't sit well with me that he could literally go to college, get a degree, cheat his way through, and be in charge of me, high speed, low drag Marine who did everything the right way according to the standard at the time. And so I knew at that point I had to get out of the Marine Corps and get a college degree, that doors would be open to me. That wouldn't otherwise be open to me without a degree.
Mm.
And at that point in time, I knew I wanted to be in a position to be able to help a lot of people. And um, I I wasn't fast enough to be a pro athlete. You know, I didn't want to go and wait tables in LA hoping to be discovered. And so I
Mm.
said, well, maybe one day I'll enter the political arena, you know, and become a lawmaker or something along those lines. And if you're going to become a lawmaker, then you should know law. And
Right.
so, way back when I was still a young Marine in Nigeria, I laid out basically a 20-year plan.
Wow.
And I was going to run for Senate in 2012, I believe it was, but I ended up running for judge in 2014. So I was close. And but I've been a practicing criminal defense attorney ever since. I'm still back in Fort Worth, back in the community that I was raised in, so that other kids can see that, you know, having a degree, going to college, going to a school like TCU, which is where I graduated from, is not a pipe dream. It's something that someone from their community can do. And I'm real, I'm tangible. They see me, they touch me, they feel me. And
Mhm.
so there's always been that bit of me that had always looked back and wanted to make it easier for those coming behind me, a bridge builder, so to speak.
Absolutely. That's interesting. And of course, thank you for your service. We are appreciative of those who sacrificed themselves for our safety. So we definitely want to, and we have a few students that believe we have a couple of Marines, but we'll move on. Um, so going back to kind of our theme and the program itself, what does organizational leadership mean to you when you hear, when I think of Marines, I think of discipline, I think of valor, I think of courage, I think of those who, like you said, can uh, get within themselves to have a clear path and be clear minded. So when you think about organizational leadership, what are some of the things that come to mind for you?
Well, first of all of those things are correct about Marines. But being a Marine and being military, I think the military embodies organizational leadership. Uh, when I hear the term organizational leadership, I look at leadership being from the macro level instead of the micro.
Mhm.
That's the war plan, the long-term strategies, whereas the micro may be get this squad, go over there and defend that bridge.
Mhm.
The macro level of it is what is the whole operational plan and these pieces that we are moving to achieve a specific objective. And so organizational leadership to me in that sense really means having the broader picture, working it together in unity to each cog doing what it's specifically designed to do, and having just that broader aspect of leadership as to where we're going and learning to work together and plotting it out so that we achieve ultimately the objective that we're looking for.
Absolutely. And you mentioned the macro level, kind of that 30,000 foot view, and then bringing it down into the micro. And again, from the outside looking in, um, military service is very contingent upon the protocols of rank and how people fall into or slot. You mentioned the person that you saw on TV earning a degree could come into a military position or rank higher than all of the years you had already served because you came in without a degree. And so, some of the things that one of the courses, especially this semester, is about ethics and integrity. And even from the Latin phrases that the military uses, um, tell us a little bit about how ethics and integrity, especially with you being an attorney, a licensed attorney, how sometimes people have conflict on what they believe about attorneys, but you having that background of ethics and integrity, how do you bring those things together?
Well, the bar is heavily regulated uh, with ethics. And as a matter of fact, separate from the bar exam, which is understanding legal premises and theories and so forth and applying them, uh, you know, in daily interactions, there's a whole separate exam for ethics.
Mm,
And if you don't pass the ethics exam, you don't become a lawyer. So
wow.
you go through law school, you take the bar exam, which is a 3-day exam covering law, but then
Mhm.
there's a totally separate exam for ethics. And if you do not pass the ethics uh, portion, then you're not going to become a lawyer because so we are guided by the Texas rules of disciplinary procedure. and it's laid out all types of things that we have to do ethically when we're dealing with our clients, how we deal with other attorneys, how we deal with the court, how we represent ourselves as a profession. And
Mhm.
so, so there are opportunities for ethical issues to come up daily in this practice and in the practice of law, to the extent that the Texas State Bar has an ethics hotline that you can
Wow.
call. I'm not sure if you can call it 24 hours a day, but you can certainly call it during business hours and
Mhm.
get an ethical opinion from someone in Austin who is on the ethics committee.
Wow.
Annually with our continuing legal education. Our continuing legal education also must have annually a component of ethics in it. Um, and so at a minimum 2 hours annually, or your license will get suspended because our profession takes ethics seriously. And that's if you can't really rely on people to be ethical when they're dealing with you. It's kind of like a contract, but it's unwritten.
Mhm.
If I can't rely on you to rely on the contract, if I can't trust that you're going to deal ethically and abide by the contract or treat me fairly, then our relationship really isn't going to be built on anything worthwhile, whether that's personal or business.
Mm. Wow. And now even looking at these questions that I've laid out, I mean it's perfect when we're talking about attorneys because it seems like we're just kind of going down the list of what you encounter and do every single day. Next question is about describe a challenging conflict or negotiation you face. And I'm sure you have thousands of examples, but what do you think would be a good example for our students about conflict and negotiation? Like I said, that's one of the classes as well this semester, conflict and negotiation.
Well, as I said, I'm a practicing criminal defense attorney,
Mm-hmm.
uh, misdemeanors, felonies, all of that. You know, every day I tell people that when my phone rings, there's a problem on the end of it. People aren't calling me, but because things are going great. They're calling because there are issues going on,
Right.
and typically it's going to be with prosecutors and with the state. And so we're always in a constant negotiation with prosecutors, and they're held to the same standard as attorneys that we are, and that's to deal ethically, don't hide evidence, things of that nature. And so and as a defense attorney, I have to tell my clients, I'm not here to lie for you. It's even unethical for me to put you on the stand and allow you to lie,
Mm.
you know, whether, and so that's an interesting dynamic in and of itself, because, you have attorney-client privilege
Right.
um, that we hold pretty sacred. But if you tell me that you did something, uh, I can't allow you as an attorney to take the witness stand and knowingly lie.
Mm.
I would have to approach the judge and let the judge know that I don't, my client may be about to give testimony that may not be truthful. And the judge then has duties that the judge has to do. But I can't even knowingly allow you to take the stand and lie about stuff, to the extent that I basically have to tell the judge, you know, judge, I gotta violate the attorney-client privilege. My client may be about to say some stuff that ain't true, you know.
Mm.
And so when we deal with prosecutors every day about issues, um, you know, every person is an individual in the criminal justice system. It's not supposed to be generalized, it's supposed to be individualized.
Mm.
One day in jail could give some people PTSD,
Mm.
where 10 years in jail, somebody, some people will sleep through that. And so it's all supposed to be individualized. And so when I have a client that I know, who may have, there's always the circumstance a lot of times behind an event that took place, and part of that is conveying it in a manner that to the state that they one don't have to condone it, but have a degree of understanding. But yet there still has to be atonement in some situations, and I say all of that while also saying that all of my clients are innocent until they sign a document or a jury finds them guilty, and so there is a tight line that defense attorneys walk when it comes to ethics, that prosecutors walk when it comes to ethics. If we see something in a police report, and we point it out to the state, like, that's wrong, that's a lie, then the state has the duty, and they do keep list of police officers who they won't sponsor as a witness. If a police officer did something out of pocket during an arrest or fabricated something, or a police officer shows up at the DA's office, look, just tell me what y'all want me to say. I really want to get this guy. Oh no, then the prosecutors won't sponsor that officer, and they'll let a lot of district attorneys' offices will have a list, and they'll let the defense bar know, basically, we don't trust these cops.
Wow.
So but ethics in this profession is something that is heavily relied upon, um, because we are a profession. And when people say, the first thing you ought to do is kill the lawyers, so that joke was because lawyers, when the king had made that decree, he knew that the lawyers would be the ones fighting for the people and trying to keep stuff right. And
Right.
so it was actually a compliment that, hey, we got to get rid of the lawyers because they're going to try to stop us from doing what we're trying to do. And so and so the bar is really high on ethics and being ethical and maintaining a good appearance for our practice and profession.
Excellent. Talk about a little, since you are, for lack of better terms, indigenous to the area. Talk about some lessons learned when you finished undergrad, you were making a transition to law school, or you had to get jobs or internships in between. What are some of the lessons learned when you talk about moving from a student or a young adult into a professional?
It's interesting in that, I'm from Fort Worth, of course. I went to Trimble Tech and Western Hills before doing 7 years in the Marine Corps. But when I got back and I got into TCU, I worked part-time at a Blockbuster Video, and then I worked part-time at the Fort Worth Club downtown as a concierge. So I was, they had a men's fitness center in the Fort Worth, and there, I washing towels and jock straps and all of that, shining shoes, but it was where all the lawyers and judges were. And it got to the point where they all knew me, and they took an interest in me and started following my progression through TCU. And then from TCU, I knew I wanted to practice law in Texas, so I wanted to go to law school in Texas. So I went to Texas Tech for law school, and they followed me through Texas Tech, sometimes would pay for books and so forth. And then when I came back and I started to practice here in Fort Worth, one of the very judges who I had my hand in his shoe, appointed me to my first criminal case.
Wow.
And he would fuss at me sometimes, and folks were like, Leon, why is the judge always fussing at you and doing? I said, well, that's because he loves me, and he's taken an interest in me, and he wants me to do well. So he takes liberties with me that he wouldn't with other people, but I know where it's coming from because he wants me to be the best version of myself and a good attorney. And to the extent one day he told me, he's like, Leon, the thing that's gonna really drive you to be a good attorney may actually also affect your personal life because uh, you believe in people. you know he said, I don't. you know but because then that's just my Christian nature. Yeah, I believe that if I don't believe that anybody or everyone can be redeemed, then I just put a limit on God,
Right.
and my God is limitless. So if I put a limit on what he can do for you or who he can and can't redeem, then I
Mhm.
just put a limit on him. So I was like, okay, well, I gotta do what I'm supposed to do so that when my sojourn is over with and he asks me, what did you do with what I gave you to do? I can say, Lord, I did my best to help, you know, who you sent my way, because everybody I represent is imperfect. I've yet to
Yes.
represent a perfect client.
Yeah. Well, I hope other people know, like you know, that none of us are walking around perfect in any aspect. So if we can use that as a baseline, then I think we all can be a lot better individuals. So for
Yeah.
our last question, thinking futuristically, and typically I wrote this to kind of bracket the years of 5 to 10 years, but now generationally things move so quick. How do you see leadership changing personally and in your industry over the next, let's say, 2 to 5 years as opposed to 5 to 10, just because of how quickly things are moving and changing?
Well, I think that this answer, and I'm going to tie it into the previous one. A lot in law and the practice of law is about relationships.
Mm,
Uh, you know, you'll hear clients sometimes say, "Man, I don't want that lawyer." I saw the lawyer laughing with the prosecutor. They're all together. No, you better be glad that I know the prosecutor and that we went to law school together, or that we have, something in common. Because when I go to them and say, "Hey, this is Leon talking to you. I don't like this," or "This
mm,
is," they'll listen. They'll give me the time of day and say, "Well, let's take a look at that." So when you hire a lawyer and you're looking for one, experience, to the ability to communicate. If you're looking at a trial lawyer, everyone's seen My Cousin Vinny, when you had the one who was stuttering and couldn't get the, and then you had Vinny, who get up and just hit you with it and make it plain.
mm,
So even if you have, if you're on the right track mentally, you still have to be able to convey it. Now, some people can convey their thoughts better in writing. We'll say, do you want a test taker or a deal maker? You
right.
want somebody who can write a brief, or you want somebody who can walk a thief, you know, straight up out the courtroom, you
Yeah.
know. And there's danger to both. So you wanna have a good balance of both. You want to be able to communicate, but you also, those relationships that you build in college, those relationships that you build in law school, they carry over, because somebody in your law school class is going to be the judge one day, if not you.
Hmm.
And so you have to have, access to people who will listen to you.
Hmm.
When you have the Johnny Cochrans and so forth, whenever they took a national case, you know, um, they would always hire local counsel, because they needed someone local who had relationships,
Mm,
who people would listen to. And so, as you, in the law field, in the law arena, the same rules of conduct and standards of conduct that we always have, we're having a changing dynamic, as everyone is with AI. We have to be careful about having AI or Chat GPT or Gronk, write a brief, because they've been shown to make up cases to give a certain slant to it. And when you go back and like, where does this case come from? You look it up, and it's just something the computer made up and made it sound good. And judges in a lot of jurisdictions have actually entered instructions that if you submit me a brief, you verified every case in it and so forth, so that the judges aren't relying on misinformation. So everybody right now is trying to adjust to AI, but in a real sense, at the end of the day, it's always going to be in law about connections and about relationships, um, because a lot of defense attorneys were former prosecutors. So you get to see both sides and you have to be able to argue both sides. And at the end of the day, prosecutors uh, are working for public safety. And I want public safety.
Right.
So I tell people we're on the same team, and justice is a range. It's not a finite point. Sometimes you need low end justice, still justice. Sometimes a case may call for high end justice, still
Hmm.
justice. And so the next 5 to 10 years, a lot of the lawyers are going to be more prominent. There are a lot of people talking about constitutional issues, and anything that touches the Constitution goes all the way down to people's doorsteps. So that's why Supreme Court cases have such an impact, because they meet people at their doorstep. And so lawyers will continue to uphold the standard. We'll continue to work together. We got different organizations that have different slants and so forth, but it's all undergirded by our ethics and really by our relationships. And because whether it's criminal or civil, courtrooms should not change. They should be about justice.
Hmm.
Regardless of who the plaintiff or the defendant is, it should always be about justice. And that's to this date what we've tried to uphold, and I think we've done a pretty good job. Everything doesn't always work out just so. All in all, a pretty good job, but we're still chasing that standard.
And the last thing I want to bring up, one of the things that I admire about your practice and you personally is something probably happened maybe 5, 6 years ago when you actually took a stand, a leadership stand, and struck out walking to Austin, Texas from Fort Worth because of your beliefs, because of the voice that you had. And as a last kind of thing for to the students, um, tell them a little bit about that, but more so of the power and fortitude that it takes sometimes to walk alone, literally.
Well, I in 2020, which is what a lot of people have deemed the summer of Floyd. That's when a lot of protests were going on around the death of George Floyd. The governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, said while he was at George Floyd's funeral that maybe it's time that Texas had a George Floyd Act to cover certain types of behavior, because um, no one should, be killed on the street while somebody has their hand in their pockets. That just was a bad look all the way around. As a practicing criminal defense attorney and knowing numerous others, we sat down, we see body cam footage, we see a lot of things that the public doesn't see with respect to criminal law. Being a police officer is a tough job, and we all need the best, well-trained police officers that we can get. And so to let the governor know that I and a lot of other people in Tarrant County, district attorneys, chiefs of police from various cities were in support. Um, at some point in time, you have to question what you're worth. What have you done? What's going to be your legacy? What's going to be your impact? And I was reminded of how uh, Dr. King walked from Selma to the capital of Alabama, and they walked 50 miles. But when they walked, they many of them were wearing their Sunday best. They didn't have Hokas. They didn't have Brooks and New Balances and Nike Airs. None of that stuff. Camel packs, And I was like, well, if they can walk 50 miles, surely I can walk 200.
Mm.
And so I walked 200 miles to better police and community relations, because we have to have police. No
Hmm.
ifs, ands, or buts about it. We have
Right.
to have police, but we need the best ones we can get, and police officers who get it. And so I was going to support the governor in his comments, and it ended up being I walked roughly 25 miles a day for 8 days straight.
Wow.
Uh, from Fort Worth straight down basically I-35. Every inch of that route I covered on my own 2 feet. I didn't skip any. It wasn't symbolic. It was actually done. And it was done during what ended up being the hottest week of the year. When I got to Austin, um, the very day that I made it to Austin, there was a lot of clamor and stuff about it. But when I got to Austin, the governor decided that day to go to Fort Worth before I showed up, right where I had started from, uh, and and avoid me. However, um, me being the Marine I am, I just basically stayed in Austin 35 days outside of the governor's mansion, um, waiting to talk to him. And so I called one day at the behest of some people, and they were like, Leon, just call him. Just call. So I called the governor's office. They immediately knew who I was. They put me in touch with the governor's general counsel. He
Mm.
said, come and talk to me. And then I'm going to wrap this up. He said, I would talk to you. I said, well, I would have called you. I wouldn't have walked 200 miles to talk to you. But, you know, I ain't being rude. I'm going to go and I'm going to talk to you. And I'm going to give you some of these ideas that we came up with as lawyers,
Hmm.
you know, to present to you. And as chiefs of police, when I was, hey, Liam, you get to the governor, tell him these programs that we're doing. And these are some of the things that are working for us and that we'd like to see as chiefs of police. District attorney, hey, tell them about this act. Bringing up, it worked in this state. Tell them, so this wasn't like wanton and raggedy, So when I met with them and they had all of their legislative aides and I was kind of like sitting there, I told them about a few of the things that we were really looking for to help, officers out. Officers didn't weren't taking as much. They didn't have personal time off. If you can only imagine, Dr. Pullam, if you get called to a car wreck where a baby's been tossed from the vehicle, a vehicle's laying on somebody's head, that's traumatic.
Right.
And that's something that the average human being, that I won't say an average, that human beings aren't supposed to see. And so, but your very next call could be a noise violation because a bunch of eighth graders are having a pool party, and one of them may be chirpy, and you don't want to go body slamming a eighth grade girl in a bikini
Right.
because you just came from a hard situation. And so the officers, we found out that a lot of departments didn't have a way for those officers to exhale. If they ran out of vacation time, they couldn't take additional time. Like, no, we want them to get services. Go talk to someone. We wanted to destigmatize, oh, he had to go see a counselor. Yeah, he did. And he's in much better shape than you are mentally because you didn't when you saw that scene of a bloody
Hmm.
crime or something. And so a lot of the things that we brought up, they actually did put into policy, but of course they didn't get us any credit for it, which wasn't the point. We
Right.
wanted the result was way more than the credit. And we told them, look, if you like that, we had more. So
Hmm.
whether you took the credit for that or not, that means that we were at least thinking on the same pathway, because what you just presented show look a lot like what we presented,
Right.
and you should at least want to see the rest of what we have.
Right.
So but that was at some point, and I encourage this amongst everyone, your students, when you look and you ask yourself, we only get so many rotations on Earth. And during my time here, what did I do that made a difference? And whatever level you wanted to be on, um, large scale, small scale, within the family, everybody got family dynamics. If you were the one to bring the family back together, great. you
Hmm.
know So when people look back on you and they ask, what did you do? You know, but when you're old and you can at least say, this is something that I did that actually, meant something that I'm really proud of and that I can take to my grave with me. And that was a thing that was personal to me.
Mhm.
People would walk with, people that were doubting where I was. I made my location public the whole trip, and I did have people who would find my dot in Google Maps, and they would come walk with me uh, and share things with me and pay for gas, or it was just it was the type of effort that strengthened uh, your relationship and your admiration for humanity.
Yeah.
We're still all in this together, and to have strangers show up with their kids and say, "Look, there he is,"
Mm.
it was a humbling experience, and I'm still hurting. You know, I left a size 11. When I got to Austin, I was a legitimate size 13. Uh,
Wow. Wow.
yeah, and it took 4 months. One of my legs went numb, and it took about 4 months for to get it back to being as close to normal as it was before then. Um, but that's my reminder
Mhm.
of how to treat people, and every day when my body aches, when my hips hurt, or when my feet hurt, it just reminds me of, keep working towards having better relationships between people. And again, that there's that word again,
Yeah.
relationships. So
Yeah.
build strong relationships and have respect for one another, and be humble enough to listen to other people's opinions, prosecutors, opposing counsel. Sit down,
Mhm.
listen, and communicate. And because the vast majority of court cases actually get worked out, it's only, I believe, 5% actually go to trial. The other 95% get worked out, and they get worked out because people sit down and listen to one another and come to an agreement.
Very nice. Well, we are so thankful uh, to have this time and opportunity to hear these words of wisdom. Our program will be better. These students will have life lessons, and who knows, may inspire some of them to pursue a law degree and to work in their own communities as well. So we're thankful to have you, and we appreciate you taking the time with us today.
I appreciate again the consideration and look forward to working with you in the future, and hopefully I may meet some of your students.